All right, so I just been doing my history homework, and it's talking about federalism and anti-federalism in America after the Articles of Confederation and the construction of the Constitution. Um, the main rise of federalism came from the Federalists in 1788 by by Hamilton, Madison, and Jay. I think it's talking about Alexander Hamilton, James Madison, and John Jay, um, and they composed the Federalist in 1788. Um, Most of these ideas were to try to counter what my class dubs as British PTSD, where the central government so like Congress would have too much power, similar to the way Parliament and King George back in Britain during this time had a lot of power. The people didn't really have a say of what they could do. It was just the higher ups, the elite. This is what the Federalists is trying to counter. Now, I was trying to relate this a lot towards today's society and back then, and like just how different things were. Like again, what's coined in my class, this expression called British PTSD, comes from again, like I said before, like the ability for the common people not to rule themselves, or the same way how like elite in America didn't have representation back in Britain, so they didn't have a lot of power there. Um, I have so many notes and it's kind of like all over the place, just my thoughts. Um, it's just the of course with any argument there's a counter argument. Similar, so to add on to this, the counter argument to federalism was the anti-federalism, very creative. Anyway, the anti-federalists were, quote, people that lacked the coherent leadership of the Constitution's defenders. So I haven't finished completely reading, and I'm not 100% on this history, but then again, what do I really know? I'm just assuming that these are common people or just elite that are jealous that they don't really have a seat at the front table when it comes to developing government of America, next big country. Um, they argued that popular self-government flourished best in small communities where rulers and ruled interact daily. Where the rulers, so like the elite, and the ruled, the common people, interact daily. Only men of wealth would have the resources to win election to a national government. To sum up, their counter argument for federalism is that only the elite really are going to have the power to, or the resources, quote resources, to actually like make a change in America with legislation, and even executive power. Freaking Thomas Hancock from Virginia State, who works on a farm, all of a sudden won't be able to go on an election campaign, which even back then especially cost money to promote himself. Even back then it was harder to get promotion across the country. There weren't railroad systems set up. Newspaper was a thing, but it was still hard to get from state to state. So if you didn't have the resources already implemented in your American family, or you weren't well known as like an inventor or philosopher, something famous like that, it was hard for a common person to even get recognition in the large scale, even in a new country like America. Without something drastic happening like Shays Rebellion is a complete counterpoint to what I'm talking about now. But I digress. Um, right down on the bottom of the page, this whole section that was talking about anti-federalism. Um, it was talking about how anti-federalists, when they were going to the polls, they would actually wear caps that bear the word, quote, bear the word liberty on them. So they would have a hat like this, but instead of instead of it being naked, it would say liberty. Obviously, telling everybody what their political views are. And then later on it says, quote, "What is liberty?" asked James Lincoln of South Carolina. "The power of governing yourself. If you adopt this Constitution, have you this power? No." Um, what this really struck me hard, and this is actually why I even started this recording, because again, this whole theme of liberty and what is liberty and how liberty is being um, addressed in America come comes right back up again. Um, he's our James Lincoln of South Carolina is arguing that if a big government, if Congress, rules you, executive, people in D.C. Well, not at the time, but like big federal government rules you, then you really aren't, you're not free. You don't have liberty because you're not self-governing yourself. Now, I I get this. I empathize with this. Like, hey, if you can't walk down the street because the federal government tells you can't do it, then what freedom do you have? Stuff like that, like simple stuff like that. Like that's just an example. Um, but at the same time, philosophies such as Stoicism and Buddhism tell people that you do have control over yourself. In life there are some things that you can and cannot control, but the things that you can control, those things you have freedom over. You have That's your own liberty. That's something that I believe. I really do believe in that everybody has liberty, no matter what situation you're in. You have liberty over yourself, and nobody can take that away from you. I'm not saying that like some trying to be inspirational for people that are like her or something. I'm just saying that like as truth. Um, and this mindset really does make sense. The anti-federalist mindset of like a big government ruling the country. Um, even with checks and balances, it's still a little suspicious because another anti-federalist point is the idea of the elite only being able to be in government, state government, um, especially big government, Congress, stuff like that. That's their mindset. They feel excluded. Common people feel excluded, which is very awesome that this was brought up back then. In the pioneer ages of America, early years of this idea of elite, elite versus elite versus common people. There's a divide, um, and they're very different. Anyway, I digressed again. This mindset does make sense because everybody is living in everybody in America is living in a time where they just don't want to be like Britain. They don't want to have a government that rules over them, like a monarchy, oligarchy, stuff like that, where Parliament and the King all have power over the country and empire. But in today's society, if the same argument, I think the same argument is still being brought up of like common people versus the elite. You know, is being ruled by state government and um big government like Congress. Like, is that really us being free? Like as people in general in the world, as well, let's in this case American people, American citizens. Because we're technically not self-governing ourselves even today, according to the anti-federalist standards, because um, our like legal making rules, stuff like that, taxes, is in the hands of other people or politicians. A lot of the times can be dubbed as elite. But again, I was talking about ideas such as found in Stoicism and Buddhism. I just broke my pen. That tell you that you have control over yourself. You do have controls over things. You don't have the control over like the weather. Like for example, right outside it's kind of like mellow and it's raining. It rained, so a lot of people don't. Nobody has control over that, as at least for now. But you have control over yourself. You have control over the way you think, the way you dress, the way you look, the way you talk to people, the way you act, how you respond to things that can make you angry, things that make you sad, stuff like that. And to me, that is liberty. That's liberty in any sense. no matter what whatever situation you find yourself in, like maybe you broke your foot, your skateboard broke, you have to do chores that you don't want to do. You're dying off of starvation because your ship wrecked or something in the middle of the Indian Ocean. You know, you still have control over yourself and what you think and what you do and what you're gonna do in those situations. Um, so I just it's just I'm reading my notes right now. If people have a lot more ways nowadays to be independent compared to back then. Um, Back then in history, especially European history, they had feudal systems. After the fall of the Roman Empire, they had feudal systems where lands were ruled by a king. It was a monarchy, and to live there, you would have to work. And if you didn't work well, you're not getting food, stuff like that. So it was very hard to just say, you know what, I'm not gonna work today. I'm gonna go do my own thing. I'm gonna rule my own land. No, land in Europe was pretty bad anyway back then, and all the land was already being ruled by kings. I'm not 100% on the history of Europe, so maybe some people did develop like their own, like maybe own rebellions led to like anarchist society, whatever. But at the end of the day, compared to today, like present time, compared to only almost a couple hundred years ago, it was a lot harder to be independent and to think that you actually had liberty, freedom over yourself. Today, we do have a lot more liberty over ourselves. Me being able to record this, I chose to do this. This is my action. Me moving my hands, this is my action. That is liberty. It might not be the liberty that people such as James Lincoln of South Carolina from the 1780s, 1790s wanted, but at the end of the day, every person on earth has liberties. Everybody's free in their own way. They control themselves. And things like the Holocaust, horrific genocides like that are counter arguments towards, control over people. But even in dark and dangerous situations like that, people did realize that everything came from their perception of it. And if they could control that, then they were free. In a way. Either way, this is my first take of doing a vid on YouTube or just recording. It doesn't really matter. I don't even know if this is going to stay up. But, those are just my thoughts. And that's just me thinking and starting out. Um, yeah. People are a lot more privileged than they actually think they are. You know, it's true, seriously. Like, I have privilege. Even though I'm growing up in the South Bronx where if I walk outside, there's already shit laying at the side of my doorstep. Out like of my building, you know, getting, being in danger of getting jumped because I'm wearing um, my uniform of a school, walking by another school. People don't like that school, like the school that I'm from, stuff like that. Skateboarding and potentially feeling, like I can't skateboard because somebody's going to push me off it and jack it from me. I still have privilege. I still have liberty. I still have freedom. And it comes from my mind, my perception of things, and how I just treat myself, treat others around me, treat the world around me. Um, yeah, that's just a sneak peek of my philosophy. Alright, I'm gonna end this.